Okay, we'll call our public hearing on the fiscal year 2025 budget to order. And this is the public hearing, so we open this up now for any public input on this budget. No takers out there? We hear from you enough. Scott, no comments? All right. Seeing none? Do we have any letters, Laura?
No.
Okay. All right. We'll adjourn the budget hearing.
Presented already.
Okay. So the public hearing is over, but we have Mr. Mullany available here if any of the members have any questions about the FY '25 budget. Jamie, want to step up? Anybody have any questions, or? Mrs. Pretios?
All right. How you doing, Mr. Mullany? All right, so this is, I have a bunch of questions. Some are more clarification. Okay. I don't know if you brought the budget we had before. I did try to reference page numbers, so it would be a little easier to find out where I was asking. Page 9. The special ed work study that we're reducing funding on or eliminating, it looks like. Can you just explain what that is?
That used to be a small amount that was when Work Inc. was in the city, and we had internships and would send a lot like the LEAP program, and would use that for funding. The LEAP program is self-funded now. We haven't used this for several years, and we just figured we might as well cut it because it has not been used for at least 5 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Page 10. So I was just kind of looking at, so this is lists on the top portion there, the extracurricular amounts for each school. And I was noticing with the high schools, you know, they have the same amount budgeted for them for extracurriculars. But in the elementary and the middle schools, they're all different. Is there a reason for the difference in how much each school gets, or is it?
We do it based on per pupil.
Okay.
The anticipated as of usually June 10th, we reallocate them.
Okay, so it is a per pupil. There is a
Correct.
formula that
Yep.
gets you to those amounts. Okay.
Same with the text and the supply.
Okay. And the activity stipend, what is that and how is that different than the per school?
That also is that the extracurricular is for the high schools and the middle schools. The activity is contractual. There's an amount in the QEA contract that it goes to each elementary school for the activity stipends. We actually spend more than that, and we have more than is in the contract in that, so.
Okay, so it's just part of it. Okay. All right, thank you. Page 13. Just looking at the security guards portion of the 20, basically, why does it look like we're going from 6 security guards to 2 at Quincy and 5 to 1 at North?
We're going from 4 to 6 at Quincy High School. That's an increase of 2.
Oh, okay, all right. But we have 6 there now.
Yes, they were funded through ESSA funds,
Okay,
so we had to bring them back into our budget.
okay. Okay, all right. So they're just joining our budget now, but they've already been there. We're
Correct.
not hiring new.
Correct, no,
Okay.
no. We had several positions that were ESSA funded specifically for COVID, and one of these was there was a lot of separation of students at the time that we needed additional staffing for that.
For sure, yeah. Oh, I think it's great that we're keeping them. If we can go to page 18. The translation services, I think a couple of us brought up our concern about that at the last, when we first saw the budget. And I was just wondering if there was any, I don't believe there was any outreach or surveys done to families, but was there any, do you know if, or maybe Dr. Perkins, if there was any additional information about if we've reached out to see if there's anything that parents or families think that we're lacking or we could use that money for, things that we might be any other ways we could use translation services, that money to improve things for families.
I would say, we have not reached out specifically to parents, but I don't think that there is really, I mean, I guess I would say there's maybe one other thing, which would be the equipment for the simultaneous translation, but it doesn't even come close to the 200,000. And I think we actually could cover it within the budget that we have. So we really, I mean, I think we were generous with the 300,000 that we left in there, with how much we typically use, like on an average year. So as Mr. Mulaney had said, we used it for 2 years, with the 500,000, and we each year have had significant savings in that line. I think because we have the family liaisons who are able to do a ton of translation for us, so they do a lot of written translation. They also do, verbal translation. We have the language line, which is an unbelievable resource. Our staff use that consistently. And now we have SMORE, which also does the written translation. And then when we have things like IEP meetings, or that we need documents, like actual like legal documents translated, we do use the company that we work with for the language line. So it all comes under that like same invoice basically. And we've been doing, we honestly did not know what to expect when we first, were increasing that line. And I think we're actually doing really, really well. We translate anything people ask. We never have a problem. People ask for assessments translated. We translate everything. We're sending a translator for simultaneous translation to the Granite Academy graduation ceremony. So we literally do, if a parent asks for translation, a school lets us know, we send them to report card conferences. We really do translate anytime a parent asks us. The only thing I would say that we maybe would like to explore is the simultaneous translation. It's basically like an earpiece, and it connects to a channel. And that, I think at the most it's like $15,000. It's not a significant investment, and definitely I think we could cover it in the translation line.
Okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable with it as long as, like I say, I think oftentimes we think we do things well, but if we were to ask families, I would feel probably just a little bit more comfortable if we were to even just send out like a couple question survey or something, just to say, is there anything additional, or even just to our EL families, is there anything additional that you're having trouble accessing because of a translation issue, and have that be translated so that they could understand and respond to that. So I guess I'm comfortable with it as long as we get the same comfortability from families that they feel like we're doing everything that we can.
Yeah,
to help
I mean,
them.
we could send out a couple of questions to our EL families between now and next school committee meeting.
Yeah, even if it's a subset, just to see
Yeah,
what
yeah,
the
we
what
can
the
do
thoughts
that.
might be.
Tangentially, when we were doing the SOA and a lot of outreach
Yes.
to everybody, I mean, that was not an issue that was brought up.
That's good to.
And
that's
we
good to-
did just have an LPAC meeting, and I mean, everybody was very appreciative of the work that the translators do.
Okay, it's just once you cut an item, it's
Yeah.
harder to bring it back than it is to.
Yeah,
so
no, I totally understand.
Just exploring it all before we do that cut. Increasing the, I'm sorry, so looking over, this is actually a question that I have for future pages too, but looking at the library books and periodicals, there's also a later page that has, I think on page 24, has a bunch of things that have been level funded for 3 years, like postage, I think, and different things like that. I'm just wondering, with the cost of everything going up, are we okay level funding a lot of these items, or do you feel like any of these items that we have level funded for 3 years, any of them are, did we kind of over budget in the 2 years ago, or are we going to be shortchanging ourselves?
We wind up with a little less to inflation every year, pretty much. The supply line, you see it for 3 years. People on this board know that these lines, with a few exceptions, have been level funded for almost 20 years. It's just, it was cut back, way back in 2008 when we had an economic downturn. We've added to certain supply lines, like for occupational education, a lot of technology, but we keep losing purchasing power. But things change too, because, the techs are not quite what they used to be, and that's where we need more in software. So we'll get by.
Okay, right, I just wanted to make sure, like, we aren't, our media centers, I don't want them to be suffering, because it looks like we're giving them the same amount of money, but they're actually kind of probably getting less for that money than they did. So I just wanted to make sure that we're comfortable with, that you guys are comfortable with the amount that we're continuing to kind of keep on that level of funding. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, and lastly, on that page, 18 is my big page. I'm almost done, I promise. Special education tuition. I don't see a decrease in that line item as I thought I might see on that, because I thought we were going to have at least a few kids coming back from outside placements for the RDLC. Was that not the case, or are we?
We're running a deficit in that line right now anyway, so even if they come back, which we're obviously hoping they are, and we've got everything fully funded there. This line has been level funded, as you see, for 3 years, and this is certainly a line that has gone up in expense because the tuitions have risen pretty rapidly, much higher than the inflation rate. So if we had more funds available to us, I think that's one of the areas we'd look at adding money to, not reducing it.
Okay, so even with the RDLC, one of the goals bringing those kids back here, we're not there yet. We're not going to see any savings on that for next year, at least.
I don't think you will see it, as Jim said. I think that we have a lot of kids with a lot of needs, and it's not just necessarily students with autism. So this encompasses all of our students who are out of district, the out of district tuition line. And so, I think that we will see it over time, but I do think, because the hope is that, yes, we'll be bringing kids back, but also we won't be sending kids out in the first place. So I think that over time, we're really hoping that we will see a decrease in the number of students. So right now, we have, I think, over 180 students who are out of district. That's a lot. So really, our goal is to try to get those numbers down and do more to, keep our kids within the district. So I think in general, yes, with the RDLC, absolutely. I think that's going to be a huge savings for us. And I think that once parents see it open and working and, build some trust that this is going to be a great program, and it is a great program, I do think that we will see, some savings in that area. But I think in general, I think we are looking at who are we sending out, and making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can in the district before we move to send a student to out-of-district placements, because I think it's around 185 kids. That's a lot of kids out of district.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for your comments on that. Just a couple more. Page 19 on the professional and discretionary fund of a $381,500. Is there, can you just give some examples or a description of what that might be used for? I'm curious as to.
It's a contractual item with the QEA.
Okay.
Each member has a $450 professional discretionary reimbursement. They can use that for classes. They can use that for supplies in the classroom or anything educational related. It's a way to get things into the classroom that are not budgeted and that the teachers particularly need. So it's very helpful to, I think, the teachers as well as to us.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I just wasn't exactly sure where that went to or how that got distributed, so thank you for
It's
that.
contractual and the vast majority of it goes to the classroom itself, so.
Okay, that's great. And I think that, just two last questions. I think I already answered, we already took care of one. Two last questions. On page 20, we're under educational software. Just help me walk through these numbers. So we went from 230,000 to 410.5, and now, so we're increasing that 180,500. Is there, oh, it's on the bottom. Never mind. Sorry, I just saw the little footnote on that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. And my last question was on staffing. So, and I'm kind of specifically asking, so we haven't really gone down in any academic staff or classroom staff, but are there any positions that we've lost? I'm thinking, for instance, Central used to have Spanish and French as an option for eighth grade. And because we haven't been able to get a French teacher, all the kids are taking Spanish in eighth grade. And I'm just wondering if did that French position, is that eliminated from the budget, or is it still in there in case we can find one? Or is the plan not to get another one? If you could just,
Yeah, so the French position at Central Middle School was actually, it was only like a .2. So I think that position still exists. It's just part of another person's.
Because I think they were sharing it with
They were
Quincy High
sharing, yeah,
School.
sharing it with with another school. So it was only one class. So it wasn't like it was a whole position. It was just one class. And so I think that was absorbed into just another, in another position up at the high school, is my memory
Yeah,
from last
'cause
year.
they were sharing a teacher from Quincy High School.
It's,
and
we do it
now-
at Atlantic too. They go from North Quincy High School to Atlantic to do one class.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I would love to have that be an option at the middle schools, French or Spanish, or just to have an option of more than one language. So, I mean, if there's a way to get that back, and I didn't know if that needed to be reflected in the budget to do that, or if you find someone, you'd kind of add them in.
On it really it's the high school enrollment right now. What we're doing is, because French is difficult to find a teacher, so they share. So it really depends on the high school enrollment also, because we need to make sure that we don't have really super high classes at the high school. So if we can, then and we have interest, then we will try to work that out in the places that we can. But it definitely is challenging because it doesn't require a full-time teacher at the high school. So getting like a .2 French teacher on its own is pretty much next to impossible. So,
Right. Yeah, I mean, even if it was a full-time person for all the middle schools, maybe they could just do French just at all the middle schools or something like that. But, I mean, that's outside the budget constraint. But
Yeah.
that would, just didn't know if we needed to put a placeholder for any of that type of stuff that we may have lost or may not have been able to fill. So there's none of those that.
not that
Okay.
I can think of. no.
Okay, that was
Yeah.
my last question. Thank you. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Sorry, got thrown into this in the middle of it all. Any other questions? No? We all set?
We'll need a motion to approve, to send it to the full committee for approval.
Okay.
That would be a roll call.
Okay.
Motion to approve and send to the full school committee.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Lebo, second by Mrs. Hubley, to roll call vote to send the budget to the full committee for a vote.
Okay.
So,
I'll do
roll
the roll
call.
call.
Yep.
Mr. Begoli? Yes. Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mr. Guttrow? Yes. Mrs. Hubley? Yes. Mrs. Lebo?
Yes.
Mrs., reading up an old one. Mrs. Perdios? And Mayor Koch.
Okay, all set?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're closing the budget meeting and moving on to teaching and
We can
learning.
open the next one. That might be me. Yep, that's me. Good evening. I'd like to call the Joint Teaching and Learning and Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee meeting to order. And the first item on our agenda is updating and aligning the K through 5 rubrics, report cards, and pacing guides for ELA and math. Ms. Quinn and Ms. Vaughn?
Can you hold for 1 second, please? Superintendent has an advisory to read prior to the meeting.
This subcommittee meeting is not a meeting of the whole school committee. Therefore, per open meeting law, only subcommittee members may discuss, deliberate, and vote. The subcommittee members on the joint teaching and learning and equity, diversity, inclusion subcommittees are Mrs. Lebo, Mr. Begoli, Mrs. Hubley, Mrs. Cahill, Mr. Begoli again, and Mr. Gattro.
Thank you.
And I'll turn the microphone over to these young ladies to take us through the first item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Lebo. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bridget Vaughn, the coordinator for ELA for the district, and I'm here with my colleague Kim Quinn, coordinator for mathematics. And tonight we wanted to share with you just an update on where we are. As you know, bless you, as you know, both ELA and math have undergone some significant improvements with new curriculum. And part of that was to take a look at our report cards, our rubrics, our pacing, and so forth as part of phase 2. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that and just give you an update. But accompanying that are some visuals just with this update, just to give you a better idea. Bless you. So this visual is just a timeline of where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. So you can see that this is the timeline for implementing high-quality instructional materials, or HQIM. That's the acronym for that. And this timeline spans from 2021 to 2025. Our ELA teams have worked through the past few years creating an instructional vision statement, adopting our new core curriculum in K-5, Amplify CKLA, completing training, and beginning full implementation. Our timeline follows the recommendations from Implement MA, which is DESE's protocol from the Center for Instructional Support. And this process is broken down into 3 phases, and we're currently completing phase 2. So that's in that white circle there. The goal of phase 2 is to move from routine use of HQIM to refinement. So in this phase, teachers move from strategic decision-making about implementation to maximize impact on student learning. To that end, we've continued training and coaching in professional learning communities centered around this goal. In addition, phase 2 meant looking at our report cards, the accompanying rubrics, and our pacing and alignment. Next year, we'll transition into phase 3, which is moving from refinement of HQIM into skillful use. And in this phase, teachers will become experts in the implementation to help others maximize their impact on student learning. So, as I said before, as part of our update tonight, we thought that showing some visuals of this process would be helpful. So first you see some examples of the revised ELA portion of the report card. On the left is a grade 2 example. What we did here is look closely at the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks for English language arts and literacy and made adjustments so that our standards-based report card mirrored these expectations. You see that reading standards on that grade 2 example are broken down into subheadings by literature and informational text, foundational skills, and writing. And there are also sections for handwriting and language, but just because of how small it was going to be, it was not going to be visually pleasing and you wouldn't be able to read it. So that part got cut off. But all the report cards that are in print look like the example on the right for all grades K-5. Sorry, on the left. On the other side there is an example of the grade 5 assessment sheet, which is in Google. All grades have these. So here you see a list of skills and where teachers can find these skills within the curriculum. This is really helpful in assessing students with formative assessment. So in purple, you can see their inferencing, and then the description of the skill and the unit and the location within CKLA in the core curriculum. Our ELA rubric team met once a month and collected all of this, and now teachers have access to the standards, the report cards, the rubrics, and the unit alignment sheet all in one place, all in Google. Teachers can now easily look within their grade and also look at the previous level or the future grade level expectations. This has been huge in our efforts for consistency among and across grade levels in schools. Here's a snapshot of some of the pacing and alignment that from CKLA that was used during this process. On the left is a clip of a document from the skills strand of CKLA. This is the K-2 Foundational Reading Skills Code Progression Chart. It highlights some of the major aspects of what students will learn that year in each unit. Teachers and principals can easily look at this and make sure they are addressing each of these skills for a particular grade level, but also know that or when a skill will spiral back again so that the students can achieve mastery. For example, if you look at the bottom there in the black and white, you can see that at the bottom, it says Unit 10 at the end of kindergarten, students will be learning basic code spellings for the vowel team EE. But then in grade 1, aside there, after first a review in Unit 1, students will again be exposed to basic code spelling of EE vowel team in Unit 2. On the right, the colored chart there is the knowledge building progression from kindergarten through grade 5. These are all of the content topics that are taught in the knowledge strand of CKLA. So you'll notice similar topics that build upon one another. The orange line there with the boxes shows a thread through each grade level of literature, spanning from fables and stories to classic tales and poetry, and to by Shakespeare in grade 5. The purple is a nonfiction thread that shows taking care of the earth in kindergarten, to cycles of nature, to ecology, geology, and chemical matter. Visuals here in this slide show samples of the ELA rubric that accompany the standards-based report card. These samples have 2 formats for each grade level, so teachers can choose which format they prefer to use. The first, on the grade 5 example, is just a Google Doc that has the frameworks linked within it, and the other is a Google Sheet that can be copied and customized so that a teacher can keep track of student progress with formative assessments. So in each of these examples, you see how teachers can assess citing textual evidence in grade 5 on the left, and on the right is an example of how teachers can assess the standard of key ideas and details in grade 1. And now we will move on to our math updates for phase 2 with Kim Quinn.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share all the exciting work that we've been doing in the world of math. This slide shows the timeline from where we started our journey with evaluating high-quality instructional material back in April of 2021 to our plan for phase 3 of our math curriculum implementation that will take us through next year. During phase 1, as teachers began diving into the implementation of illustrative mathematics, they quickly realized that the order of the report card standards were not aligned to the new grade level units. As a result, I created a Google Doc for each school and invited all the math teachers to give their feedback regarding when each standard should be open for assessing. A team of 14 K-5 teachers were then formed. They came together and used the data collected to reorder the standards that already existed on the report card. They also took this opportunity to clarify some of the wording to make it easier for parents to understand. The team then shared the updated document with their grade level teams during the system-wide day. At this point, all teachers had the opportunity to give additional feedback, and final changes were made at this time. These changes were then submitted to the IT department, resulting in a revised report card for the 2023-24 school year. This year, we enter into phase 2 of our implementation plan, and the teachers began work aligning the pacing guides. Getting through all the standards by the end of the year can be quite challenging. It's even more challenging for grades 3 to 5 since teachers need to be finished with the curriculum before the MCAS test in May. But the team wanted this to be more than just a document that told when the teachers should be teaching a specific lesson. The teachers also knew they had to account for the fact that illustrative mathematics is Common Core aligned, not Massachusetts frameworks aligned. So they took care to note where additional lessons needed to be incorporated. They also listed materials needed for each unit and added links to resources, as well as notes that would remind teachers of disruptions to the schedule, such as MAP and MCAS testing, and shortened weeks due to holidays. This resulted in a more realistic pacing guide accounting for the actual happenings day to day and month to month here at Quincy Public Schools. We feel that this document will be a great resource to all the teachers, whether they're veterans or just starting out. Creating the updated report card rubric was the most challenging of all. We wanted to create a rubric that was clear, specific, and had well-defined categories. And that was easier said than done. There were countless discussions and many drafts. There were numerous changes to the language, and as a result, we have a document with clear and concise categories that will assist teachers with their grading. At the same time, we do know that this is a work in progress. We realize that there will be some tweaks needed once teachers use this next year. I also want to mention that all of these documents, like Bridget said, are located in corresponding grade level shared drives so that all the teachers have access to these documents from anywhere. And we also have merged all these resources into one spreadsheet with links to all the various grade level documents. This will allow teachers to have access to all grade level materials all in one location. And as we look ahead to next year, teachers will concentrate on elevating their instruction. We are entering into the third year with using illustrative mathematics, which will allow teachers to concentrate on fine-tuning their instruction. As the teachers use the pacing guides and report card rubrics for the first time, the team will be looking for feedback and making adjustments as needed. These conversations will take place during the system-wide afternoons, allowing all teachers a voice. Another positive about these resources being on Google is that any updates we make can be made in real time, which eliminates having to send out brand-new documents. And as I wrap up this presentation, I'd just like to thank all the teachers that put in the hours of hard work to create these documents. None of this could have happened without them. And that concludes our presentation. So if you have any questions at this time, we'd be happy to answer them.
You're all set. Mrs. Hubley?
I just have one. I'm very glad that you got teacher input on these, and I think that's vital to have that. When do you expect to be able to actually get a reading from the teachers as to what changes will need to be made, and when would those be able to? I know you said you can actually do them in real time to make the
Yep.
changes. So as they come to you, if they find something, can you make those changes right away, or will you be waiting for a certain time frame or anything to make the changes?
Yep, well, the teachers know who are on the team, so they certainly can be reaching out to them as well. Any major changes, we would wait till we met at the system-wide days, so we would have several of those throughout the year to kind of check in and have, like the plan is to have that on the agenda no matter what else we're doing, to kind of say, how's it going, how are we feeling with the pacing guide, how are we feeling with the first round of report cards, and how everything's worded, that kind of thing. Obviously, if someone realized there was, a typo or something else like that that just didn't make sense, we'd go in and change it right away.
Okay. And would you be getting any feedback from parents on how they're being able to see the results or how they're taking it?
Well, we look for parents in terms of like the usability of the report card.
Yeah.
The rubric is specifically for the teachers, just how they would grade. It's a document for them, but
Yeah.
then the teachers would relay like what goes into that or why they got the specific grade.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Begoli?
Just a quick question on the ELA for K. I don't see a place where there's sight words. Do we still do sight words?
We absolutely do sight words. So, Mr. Begoli, the students in, the CKLA is very developmentally appropriate, so all words are sight words once you learn how to decode them, really. So what happens in this program is that they have a list of words that are tricky words, high-frequency words, but many of those are decodable. So the system is that they might learn them and they might be coded as kind of like a stoplight, a red, yellow, or a green. And once they have learned that decodable skill, there are vowel valleys and all kinds of chaining charts on bulletin boards in classrooms. And you'll see that a word that was previously a sight word as a tricky word in red moves to yellow and then to green once the students have mastered it because it's fully decodable. Does that make sense?
Oh.
Okay. But basically, yes, there are still lists of sight words. On the report card, it's more like the coding, the decoding that is assessed. And so we have parent academies about explaining all of that. But yes,
You still do word walls?
yes, and we do sound walls. Done a lot of training with sound walls. So
Is it
that,
soundproof? All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
Me and the mic. So just to be clear, this is your third, you're going into your third year of using the CLA, right? Is that correct? So this is.
The third
CKLA?
year of having the program.
Yeah.
Back when we looked at that vision statement from November of '21, that was so that we could bring a team together to see what we actually wanted to look at, you know, and then we got sample materials, we piloted things, we looked at Curate, which is the Massachusetts curriculum evaluation tool, and then we looked at Ed Reports, which is kind of a national one. So we had to do a lot of that before we even started with the program.
So then you've had one full year of the program, and then this will be the third.
So, yeah, so
into the-
with our Gleam grant funding, we had access to the program early spring of '22, and then the '23-24 school year was our first full year. But many people had access last year and began it, but this would be the real full year. So depending on if you were someone on the team and was piloting it, they're a little bit ahead. But now we're kind of like all on the same page, and we're looking at that refinement for next year. Just if a teacher moves to a different grade level or we have a new teacher, we're ready to kind of onboard them to the program.
I've actually talked to a couple of teachers who really love the program. They think that it's
Right.
working out really well. So, and I guess that's my question. You feel good about the progress that the students are making using this?
Yeah, I'm excited to see what our M-Class spring results are going to show. We're just finishing up that Friday. We've had several other districts come and visit us locally to kind of showcase. So we, at the beginning, it would be like I would choose the school that sort of had the most experience. I can pick any school, and they welcome people from outside in. It's been great. And the teachers and families are responding really well,
Yeah.
and the kids too. Yeah.
That's, I've been hearing some good things. So thank you, thank you.
Welcome.
I want to reiterate that. I've been hearing some good things, too. I know I have a student who's not an ELA lover, really likes math and science, but CKLA, the content got to his interest, and the kid loves ELA, so
Right.
there you have it. I have one question for you, though. I heard you mention something between the difference between Mass Core and the DESI frameworks. Did you say that?
Oh,
about the-
Common Core.
Common Core and the
Common Core.
Massachusetts framework,
Okay,
yes.
so Common Core is, can you just explain that whole thing to us? What is Common Core?
Sure. So Common Core are the national standards that if you were to look at the Massachusetts frameworks, they're very close. But Massachusetts has tweaked it a little bit. So there's little things, like there might be a grade where there's an additional standard, or it might just specify the standard a little more, like with fractions, it might say just with these denominators or something like that. So it's just something that needs to be tweaked a little bit.
Just
So for the most
identified.
part, it does, but every once in a while, something will come up and they'll be like, this isn't, it's not in here, why isn't it in here? And I'm like, oh, because that's a Massachusetts standard, not the Common Core, so.
So that's what you were, just
Yeah.
making sure you were filling any gaps that might exist.
Exactly, and anything that was a little bit different, making sure that we were, making sure that students were prepared and they were covering
Right.
all those standards.
I think we're good. So thank you very much for the
Thank you.
update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am hearing great things about it. Next item on the agenda is nope, I'm sorry, that's not it at all. Chronic absenteeism. Jumping ahead to the next meeting.
Okay, well, thank you for having us here to provide an update to you on chronic absenteeism. So we have been working very hard this spring to work with our principals and our teachers and our guidance counselors to try to improve our chronic absenteeism across the district. I do need to just thank Mike Marani, who has been definitely my right-hand person in all of this. And we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of different activities to try to support this. And so I really appreciate his help in making sure that, we're remaining consistent and that we're monitoring this throughout. I will say, before we move into the presentation, just an area that we are still, we remain to be concerned about is the high school. High school obviously is significantly harder to get a hold of than the elementary and middle schools. So we are continuing to work with both principals, and that definitely will be something you'll hear Mike talk about in a little bit. That next year maybe we will look at in the superintendent's goal, really including something specific for high school, because it just is a whole different world. And so with that, I do think you're going to be very pleased with where we are so far, even though we do, as I said, remain concerned about high school. I think in general, we have made significant progress as a district in our chronic absenteeism numbers. Obviously, the year still has a little bit to go yet, but we're hoping that no new students remain, all of a sudden appear as chronically absent, between now and the end of the school year. And so tonight we'll just go over, just remind you of the definition of chronic absenteeism, remind you of the superintendent and the district goal. We'll take a look at the data from last year, update you on the current chronic absenteeism status. If we were to report right now, what would our data look like? And a status reflection, how we're feeling about what we've done and what we've accomplished. And as I said, obviously, I just mentioned an area that we're reflecting on is what we can do for the high school level. And then some focuses on what we are proposing to you to consider, for next year. And we'll come back and talk about this again next year as well. So just to remind you what the definition of chronic absenteeism is, Massachusetts does define chronically absent as missing at least 10% of the days enrolled. So on a typical 180-day year, it would mean that a student would be 18 days absent. It does include unexcused absences and regular absences. So even if your child goes to a doctor's appointment and you have a note, that still counts towards chronic absenteeism. So chronic absenteeism, as we all know, grew significantly during the COVID pandemic, and we're still struggling to return to pre-pandemic rates, although we have, I think, made significant progress. So just to remind you, what we did for a goal. So, we made this an initiative. You had asked us to take this on at a school committee meeting earlier in the year. And so we did add this. This is a district and superintendent's goal that during the 23-24 school year, district-wide, we will reduce chronic absenteeism by 2% from a base of 14.9 in K-8 and 3% from a base of 26.2 in grades 9 to 12. And that these were some of the things that we said that we would focus on: positive school-wide campaigns, early interventions for students who are beginning to show signs of struggle with attendance, individual interventions for students who are having more significant trouble with attendance, and then targeted interventions for identified subgroups. So just to remind you quickly of what our numbers looked like last year, our chronic absenteeism numbers. So last year, our K-8, or 1 to 8, kindergarten actually does not count towards chronic absenteeism. So grades 1 to 8, non-high school students, our rate was 14.9% of all of our students district-wide were considered chronically absent. So our new target for this upcoming school year is 12.9. So that is what we are striving for as a district, is to obviously exceed that target. At the high school level, our overall rate last year was 26.2. So what that means is 26.2% of the high school population, students in grades 9 through 12, are considered to be chronically absent, meaning they have 18 or more days of absences. I will just point out also to note is that if a student is enrolled with us for, say, 30 days, and they are absent 3 of those days, and then they move on to another district, they also count. They are considered chronically absent. So I think it's a minimum of 20 days that a student needs to be enrolled with us, and then they do count against a district's, or a school's chronic absenteeism. So our target is 23.2%. So that's what we're shooting for this year at the high school level. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Ronnie.
Thank you, Dr. Perkins. Good evening, everybody. So without official data from DESE at this time, we really had to get creative in terms of trying to assess where things stand as of now. And so what we did, just to kind of have an apples to apples look at a comparison of this year to last year, we quantified the total amount of students that were chronically absent as of May 24th, 2023. And so that's across grades 1 through 12. So this is a district-wide figure. And so we see that around that time last year, so again, May 24th of last school year, 1,644 students were identified as chronically absent. I should just note that that means 10% of the enrollment thus far, so typical enrollment. So if a student's been enrolled all year, it would be roughly 16 absences at that point. So it's not the full 18 at that point in the year, it's 16. And so we have seen a pretty strong decrease when we compare that to this year. So when we look at the same time frame, May 24th, for this year, 2024, we see a decrease down to 1,428 students identified as chronically absent. That shows us a decrease of 216 students, which is 13% of a decrease that we're seeing. That's a snapshot. As Dr. Perkins mentioned, the year is not over. And so we hope to see this number decrease even more. At the same time, a student that might not be on that list, they might be 1 or 2 days away from chronically absent, so they could also be added on. So again, it's just a way to get a snapshot at this point in time. But I do just want to emphasize the amount of time and effort the principals have been putting in, working with the teachers throughout the building. We know this because as Dr. Perkins and I, or as Dr. Perkins mentioned, she and I have been meeting with each of the principals throughout the year at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, talking about projections as to what we think we're going to land on when the school year 24 accountability data is available. And overall, we're very optimistic. School to school, we're seeing numbers moving in the right direction, which is down when we look at chronic absenteeism. We are concerned about high school. I'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to do there. But again, overall, moving in the right direction with still a lot more work to do as we move forward. So just a reflection on some of the shifts we made with this initiative. Now, we've always emphasized attendance. It's always been important. That is not new. Obviously, during the pandemic, the narrative of determining whether or not a student should attend school or not had been disrupted. And so what we've been trying to do is look at the current situation, the current status, and say, what can we do differently to help recoup, get ourselves back to pre-pandemic time. So one initiative, as we mentioned in the previous update for chronic absenteeism, is Accelerated Academy. So just a quick data point there, and I do just want to add this number is still climbing, so we still have Accelerated Academies taking place. So this is a fluid number at this point, but so far, we've had 217 students participate across the district, recovering a combined 486 amount of school days. So we're seeing a lot of progress there, quite honestly. We were very pleased at the elementary and middle school levels with the amount of buy-in we got on the part of the students. I think one concern we all had was, what is the incentive for a student to attend an Accelerated Academy if chronically absent is a label that's not very important to them? In other words, if it's not necessarily going to impact their grade or their credits, if they're at the high school level, what's the incentive? What I will say is the incentive has proven to be, particularly at the elementary and middle school levels, is the teachers. They have just made this program so engaging for the students. We got the opportunity to visit a couple of these programs. These kiddos are smiling, they're having fun, they're working with one another, and it really is a nice opportunity for these students. Right there, I believe that picture is Clifford Marshall. And so those kiddos were just a pleasure. And we saw that their attendance in these accelerated academies was pretty consistent. So when we offered 4 sessions, you would think, okay, we might struggle to get students to attend these accelerated academies consistently. I'm pleased to report at the elementary and middle school level, that's not the case. Most students that signed up attended all that were offered, or the majority of what was offered. So students are taking advantage of this, and we're very pleased with the results. The other adjustments we've made is nothing new. However, we've just increased our monitoring of the chronic absenteeism number. More specifically, all principals do receive an automatic weekly report. I believe it's every Tuesday they receive a report that will tell them exactly the students who are at 10% at that point in the year. So every week, they can see every student in their building who has 10% absenteeism or higher. So they're constantly able to look at this. And where this is very helpful is you might have a student who's only been enrolled in your school for 40 days. If you're only looking at absences and it's only 4, they wouldn't necessarily be on that list. But because we're going by the percentage points, we actually can look and say, okay, who's chronically absent by definition right now in this point in time? What's been a great process is each week being able to see students that are leaving that list as a result of Accelerated Academy. So they can actually work towards getting off of that list. So that's been a nice new addition to our approach here. As I mentioned, we have the chronic absenteeism check-ins that Dr. Perkins and I facilitate with each building. Increased communication. And I do just want to point out too, before I move on to communication, the monitoring is what we use to ensure that the early and targeted interventions are taking place effectively. So when we go back to the district and superintendent's goal as items within there, by us monitoring these students more regularly, we're able to target our interventions and make sure that they're happening earlier, right? We're not waiting till we're close to that 18. We're saying, okay, they're at 10% of their enrollment. Let's start acting now. Now, the communication, again, I'm very pleased with Accelerated Academy. I'm very pleased with the monitoring that's been going on. But I would say if there's one major shift that has moved the needle on this in a positive way, it's the narrative change that we've experienced in our conversations with so many families. And I think Dr. Perkins had alluded to this in our first presentation on chronic absenteeism. If we think back to pandemic times, when in doubt, students stayed home. And so if you think about it from the perspective of a parent or guardian who has a child who maybe their oldest child started public ed during the pandemic, they don't have a frame of reference of what typical attendance should look like. They often don't know what is a reasonable expectation. How many days is appropriate for a child to miss? Now, obviously, the answer is based on the individual student, but the increased communication, in particular, the educating of families as to what chronically absent means, there's many parents and guardians who said, I just didn't know. Got it, no problem. And they're right on board. And boom, that partnership really blossoms into students that were missing some days. All of a sudden, you do see a shift. And slowly but surely, as their enrollment increases, but their absences don't, they fall off that list of chronically absent. That's more effective when we do that earlier and when it's targeted. So I just want to emphasize that truly the principals, the teachers, the nurses, so many people are sharing this responsibility of communicating in a sympathetic, kind, sensitive way. And I think that's really moved the needle. We'll also continue on with our multi-tiered approach, which we spoke about at the last presentation. And then just some focuses moving forward. We are going to continue on offering Accelerated Academy programming at all levels, in particular in June. So our focus for the June Accelerated Academy is actually after the school year, prior to July 1. So the week of June 24th, we'll be able to offer up to 5 days. I say up to 5 days because it's going to be based on the school. Certain schools don't necessarily need 5 days. They might need 3 days, 4 days, but it will be up to 5 days based on need. And so this is another opportunity. What's nice about June Accelerated Academy is there's no additional school days after. So it's always, when you try to get them there to recover those days, you also want to keep those students working on those habits of continuing to come consistently. So what's nice is this is another way to get them 5 opportunities to recover days and not necessarily have to worry about the school year moving forward. They can really earn those days back and end the year on a positive note. And so, when we talk about high school being a challenge, I think we often overlook the dividends that will be paid off in high school if we focus in on kindergarten and younger ages. So the challenge with kindergarten is it's not included in the chronic absenteeism data, and I'm not suggesting it should be, but we still have to prioritize kindergarten because that is truly the year where they're forming their habits, both their families and the children. And so if we really focus in on incorporating education about the importance of attendance during our orientations and throughout the year, emphasizing though your child might be 5, it's still very important to attend school. If we can build those habits in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, I actually think we'll see over time in this marathon we're running, by the time those kiddos get to high school, the positive habits will be in place. So this is very much a long game approach as well, where as we support our students, we've got to make sure that though the chronic absenteeism number is based on 1 through 12, grades 1 through 12, we still have to really put an emphasis on our kindergarten students, making sure that we support them and make them as comfortable as possible so that they're walking into the building, happy to be there, ready to learn. Now, the challenge with high school is we're competing with credits, right? So when you talk to students, they want to know, do they have enough credits to graduate? And does Accelerated Academy help them with that? And so that's what we're working on right now. So we're in the process of trying to incorporate earned credits. Now, what we did in the past during the April Accelerated Academy is we did tie it to the Acellus program. So they could work towards courses and potentially earn their credits. So we were able to do that. The challenge with that is it's not the most engaging experience for the students as well. And therefore, they might be happy that they're working towards their credits, but if they can work at it at their own pace at home, they're less inclined to go in person, earn those days back while they work towards Acellus. So we're competing a little bit with their priorities and our priorities, right? And so we're absolutely working with both high schools to figure out additional ways we can incentivize and motivate students to participate in this program. But again, this is a multi-pronged approach. So it's also focusing on those younger ages. So as these students get older, the habits aren't as big a hill to climb for those students. So again, we're certainly going to focus at the high school level. Next year, we plan to offer a PD to our principals so that we can share best practices. So these principals have done so much work with their staff, and we want to make sure that they all have an opportunity to share what has worked, what hasn't, and therefore just continue to optimize our offerings for our students. And then continued focus on those previously mentioned items, increased communication and increased monitoring.
I would just add to Mr. Marani, I would also just add my thanks to the principals because they have really been amazing. They have worked so hard to, get these kids into school and re-engaged and get that message out there that attendance is important. And, we absolutely could not have done this work without them. And, I do want to just point out in this picture right here, we're not all pushing kids to accelerated academies. We also celebrate. So, these are students who have really improved with their attendance. And so we're having celebrations across the district. Principals are, picking the groups of children. We're bringing the pizza, or Mr. Marani brought freeze pops and giving them, certificates to celebrate the fact that they worked really hard and they persevered and they, improved their attendance and are showing up and are coming to school and are doing their work. And that's really all that we can ask. So, we're really pleased with that progress right now, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Bergoli?
I'm glad we're continuing our focus on this because it's obviously key to success. Because if you're not in school, you don't learn, you learn, you don't learn, you fail.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. Our kids, we don't want the kids to fail. On your 22-23 data, I know that you're combining elementary and middle school, but I like to see that separated, only because I think elementary is less of an issue than with absenteeism than, that's just my perspective, than middle school. I think middle school is an issue, and it contributes to the issues we have in high school. So I'd like to see that separated if we could.
Absolutely, yeah.
When we
We can
review
break that
data
down.
again. That'd be helpful.
Yep.
Second thing is, so the state, do they have guidelines for us to follow in terms of, let's say, promotion from one level to another? For example, if a kiddo is absent 50 times and fails 4 subjects, I'm saying in middle school now. What is his potential for success in high school? Probably minimal, because it develop bad habits. And we don't have I think that what we've done is not had a consequence for not attending and then failing. And I think the state's complicit with that. I don't think there's a guideline from them that would help us.
Not that I'm aware, no, I've never seen anything. I think it's local control, has always been my understanding, like local decision, if whether or not you retain a student or not is up to us.
Okay. I know there are pros and cons to that, but I just see that that's a contributing factor for kiddos in high school who don't attend, and we have, I know our dropout rate is getting better, but they're not learning. I mean, they're not, the kid, and the first thing that happens is they're tardy. They're coming in at 9 o'clock, so they're missing first period or a period and a half. So they're missing that particular subject every single day. And they fail the class. And again, they don't have the consequence, I think, for, you fail it, then what's the consequence for that? And I think we've done a good job of identifying who is chronically absent. I'd like to see us focus on why these kids are chronically absent. What's happening? Is it something in the family? Is it just a social thing that's happening now? Because I don't remember this being an issue back when I taught. Kids came to school, and we can blame COVID all we want, but COVID's gone, and we still have the issue of kids being tardy and then not showing up for school. So that's just a few statements. I don't know if you want to comment on them, but if a kid fails 4 subjects in middle school, we're setting them up for failure in high school if we promote them. That's just my opinion.
No, I think it's a real concern. I understand what you're saying. I think it's a tough decision for the middle schools to make, honestly, I really do, because, kids get older, kids get bigger, and to have a student that, is 15 and in 8th grade is not always great either. So I think it's tough. I think it's a really tough call. And I think in terms of who the students are and why, I do think that the principals and the schools have a really good handle on that and what's happening with those students. And unfortunately, I think that the punishment sometimes is, or I don't want to say punishment, but the consequence, I guess I would say, is that when you have a student who's really chronically absent, who you're talking, 50, 60 days a year, then that opens up, that could be court involved. That's like a whole other, it's actually pretty heartbreaking. It's really sad. We're involving our attendance officers, we're filing CRAs, we potentially are filing with DCF. You know, we do all of those things. We show up at students' houses, you know, all of us, Mara, you know, the principals, the guidance counselors, to try to coax that student into school. But I agree with you. It's very hard, and it's very hard to continually pass a student along when you know there's a significant need. You know, and I think that sometimes, so we try PASS. The PASS program is another thing that was created. A lot of those students are non-attenders, you know. But I do think sometimes there's just, whether it's social emotional or mental health or, you know, whatever is, you know, happening within the family dynamics, there's just a lot. And I think schools try their best, but I agree that is a tough area. And I can see the concern, absolutely, and I think the principals see it as well. I think it can be very frustrating when you're the school principal that is moving this child along, knowing that maybe they haven't gotten everything that they need in the grade that they're currently in.
And I know the teachers and the administrators do a great job of trying to address those things.
They do.
I just remember just one quick anecdote. When I was over at the elementary level, when I was a chairperson, we had a parent who just wouldn't come in for a meeting, just wouldn't come in. So we finally called the person, said, we're coming over right now. So just understand that we're gonna have the meeting at your house.
Yeah,
And I know those are things that are still done.
absolutely.
So I don't fault the
Yeah,
people who are on the front line at all.
no, I know, yeah.
I think it's coming from somewhere else. And I think we need to figure it out. Because we don't want to lose another group of kids.
Right.
And we were lost 2 or 3 years with COVID, so,
Yeah, absolutely.
right, thank you.
I'm turning off your mic. Mr. Gupta.
Great presentation. Super encouraging numbers so far. I mean, there's a couple of weeks left, but we'll figure it out. What is the threshold? 10% that's chronically absent, so it's 10%. Two things Mr. Bergoli said I want to agree with. I'd love to see the breakdown as well from elementary and middle, as well as high school. And the second thing that he asked, and I wrote this down as well, the causes. And, you know, I don't need to know the causes by kid, but it could be anecdotally, it could be an injury, it could be an illness, it could be a family situation, it could be mental health issues. But I would like to see a pie chart, just anecdotally, I'm not going to hold you to it, that shows what you all think the breakdown is for the chronic absences. And maybe it's just
Sure.
polling the principals and trying to figure that out, but what those areas are, because then you can figure out how best to tackle it, which I'm sure you're doing already. But, so that was one of my comments. So what is the timeline to get the real numbers? Like, when will you come back before us? Because the data that you have is 22, 23, where we looked at that, and then you just kind of gave where we are. So when could we expect you to come back and say, hey, these were the numbers for this school year?
In the fall, so we will have them, so they'll be reported back to us, whatever we submit, what Dan Pacho submits at the end of the school year. He'll submit the final numbers, and then in the fall, we get our new accountability data. So we'll have that, it will be included in all of the school improvement plans, and then we will also present on it again as a district. So we'll use that information to then set new goals, for the superintendent and for the district and for the individual schools for the next school year.
Okay, so that will be in, and so the time that we'll get it will be in the school improvement plans and the district.
Yeah, we'll probably do a district presentation first
good.
and let you know what the status was in terms of the district.
Yep.
And then the individual schools, that information will be in the individual school improvement plans. We put it in there every year.
And have you, I mean, I know that the lowest performing minority students with disabilities, English language learners, those were a lot of the categories. Do we know where that sits with the 200 or so person reduction? Have we done that kind of dive?
I don't have that
Yeah, okay.
delineated in this data.
So we'll get that in the fall.
Yes.
Is where that's going to come. Because that's what I'm curious about. And then, because it helps you figure out what special touch you need to make depending on the reduction. And then another question that I have is, it's useful, especially when you're making progress, to reach back to the students or the parents to say, what worked? What turned it around? Last year, the year before, you were chronically absent. What was it that brought you back? And they might say, I recovered from an injury or my family situation. But it would be useful to know from those that have moved off the chronically absent in their own words or their parents' words, what the impetus was.
Okay.
That would be useful feedback, I think. And then, so I guess I'll hold off on that. In the fall, you could talk through what you think works, you know, based on our experience, but it would also be good to get feedback from others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even anecdotally, having the principals, like if you're celebrating with the students, that's a moment to say, what turned it around?
Yeah,
So I'd
we
like
can
to know.
definitely do that.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hubley.
Thank you. So last time you were before us with this topic, you had said one of the reasons why I believe it was the Hispanic families line item was on the higher end was because that they were, a lot of the older students were staying home with the younger students who were either home because their parents had to work, because there was a language issue and the student didn't feel comfortable being at school and didn't want to go to school, and it was more of the younger student, but the older student had to stay home and be with them because the parent had to go to work on that. Is that still ongoing with those reasons? Because I noticed the number was still slightly on the higher end on those.
I definitely, yeah, I think that's still going on. I think we're working very hard at that. So, you know, they've been meeting weekly. Heather Wojcik, the EL coordinator, has been meeting weekly with Quincy High School in particular. So we're really taking a look at, you know, what classes do we offer for our EL students? You know, how can we improve engagement? You know, if we offer things that are more engaging, will that bring more students in, you know, or make students feel more comfortable coming in? You know, where are we placing our students when we get there? You know, and this is, we can talk more about this in the future too, but when we get there, you know, access scores and, you know, are we putting students in EL classes that they don't need, you know? Maybe where, you know, the student is a level 3 and we have them in a skills class and maybe they don't need that skills class. Maybe that would be more effective if they were actually in a regular education class or a different elective, or it just frees up their schedule a little bit more. And then hopefully, you know, you could increase engagement in terms of that. So we're looking at those kinds of things. We have the family liaisons who are helping, you know, I know Mara just met with a family the other day for a student that was not attending, and she's so close to graduating, you know, how can we get her? And it was work, you know, she's working during the day. So what else can we do to, you know, get you to that finish line? Because she needed like 2 classes, you know? And so, and we got her there. You know, we just checked today, and we're thrilled she's gonna graduate, you know, so we're really working hard on those things. But yes, I think that those concerns still exist, and I think that will be, I think when I think about, you know, the future in next year and looking at like a superintendent's goal or a district goal, I think my recommendation would be to focus more on those things, you know, really looking at the high school level in particular, but also, you know, our EL, our special education population, and being really more specific and targeted. This year, you know, we did the big district goal. We kind of added everyone in there. When you see the elementary right now, when we look at the elementary numbers next year, I mean, I think Beechwood is going to end up with like 1% chronically absent. So it's, you know, so they're really, really doing really, really well. I think Mr. Bagoli's right. I think it's the middle and the high schools, and in particular the high schools. So that would be, those are the things we're talking about, and knowing that we need to focus on exactly what you're talking about, Ms. Hubley, that, you know, making sure we're really aware of what's happening with those families and those children, and trying everything we can to get them back in the door.
And another question, so families who take like long vacations, long trips, does that fall under this too? And I know it had been our process in the past was to unenroll and re-enroll if a family was going to go like to visit relatives in another country for like a month or something like that. They would come back and they would have to unenroll and re-enroll. So would those numbers still be reflective in this if they did that? And do we see that?
We do see that. Yep, we do. I don't think that's been as significant a concern as it was before, honestly, like before COVID. I think more what we've heard anecdotally from principals, I would say the concern is like Disney vacations or, you know, things like that, like, you know, trips, family trips that, I mean, that's 5 days, you know, right in the middle. And if you already have a few absences, like you had the flu or you had COVID and you were out a week or something, and then you take a family trip, well, now you could be up to 10 days. And so when we run that report, you're going to pop as chronically absent, you know. So I would say those, we've met with every single principal right now. We've had a check-in meeting with every single principal. And I would say, and I don't know if you agree, Mr. Marani, but I would say without question, the vacations, more so than like extended trips, are the concern.
Yep, agreed.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate you coming back for another one. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a couple of questions. First, can we look at the high school 22-23 data?
Yep.
Because I need clarification on something that I'm not understanding. Okay, so I look at these 9 categories of students. Is every one of our students included in one of those categories?
At the high school level, yes.
So I'm looking at those numbers. I'm looking at the average of all students is 26.2%, but there's absolutely nothing above that that's less, that's 26.2% or less, except for the 8%. And I don't see that turning into 26.2, so I need help with the math. Because when I do it, it comes out to 36%, because there are 314 plus students in that, and you divide 314 by 9, you don't get 26%.
I don't know if is it because some of them might be more than one category? Is that, yeah?
Yeah, so the 26.2 is not the average of the
That's right. It
subgroups.
makes perfect sense to me now. So some people are in more than one
They
category.
could
That's
be
right.
in
They could
3
be in
categories,
3 or 4
yeah.
categories, right. Okay, thank you. I didn't really understand that. I love the Acceleration Academy idea. I think it's a difficult thing at the high school, and I'm glad you're using the online stuff. But I do think engagement's the issue, and also people who are coming here and learning English, and they're looking for a job. They're looking for a job. So I have some thoughts. If we could think about at some point in time getting bilingual paraprofessionals to work in some of the tech programs. Because we do have one paraprofessional in the tech program, but most of those are single shops. And if we could have some help in there, maybe we could find a grant or something that would help with bringing somebody who could speak Portuguese. I mean, there are Portuguese construction people all over the city of Quincy right now. You could probably bring one of them in as a para and have them work in.
Yeah, I think that's a great
I
idea.
think, I need to formulate in my mind where we might be able to find a grant for that, but, or maybe your grant person can figure that, but I really think it would help. The other question, now, I'm really dating myself now. So when I taught, families who had students who were receiving, well, at the time it was welfare, I know it's not called that now, but what students are receiving money from the state to families who receive, that if they missed 10 days or 15 days, they lost money. And that was a fact. And we would just say to the parents, you're going to lose your benefits because this is for a student, and your student's not a student anymore. So I don't know if we could look into if that type of thing still exists, but we used to
look into it.
We used to just call the parents and tell them.
Yeah, I'm
And
not
it
sure
worked.
if that's true now. I don't know if Maura knows.
I know that we have to send in verification that the student's enrolled in order.
Yeah.
Could you check on that?
Yeah,
Because it
we can-
really
we can
worked.
check into
It
it.
really, really worked when you said
Yeah.
that to the parents.
Yeah.
You're going to lose your money.
Yep, we can
Because
definitely
this is
look
no
into that.
longer a student. So I just,
Yep.
it's a dated thing, but anyway. That's really all I have to say. Thank you for the report. It's still very discouraging. I mean, it's better. It is better, but it's just a discouraging topic.
Yeah.
So just a quick question. Prior to the pandemic, about what, ballpark, what was the absentee rate? Was it much lower?
It was much lower.
Much
yeah.
lower than where we
Yeah.
are right now. And my other question would be at the high school level, of all the students that we're looking at, the new students who are coming from other countries, and then they're enrolling and they're older and they're coming right into high school. They haven't really gone through our whole system, right? They're coming in, they have a different cultural experience with the education piece. Do we have a way to break that out, like those students who are new students to this country, and see how much that percentage affects the total percentage
yeah,
of
we
the
can
high school
definitely do
kids?
that, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep, it
Because it
does.
affects the numbers, but it's basically, it's a cultural and a new student who's entering the school. They might be coming in as sophomores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yep.
don't really have an understanding of what our system's all about, but it affects our numbers.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we could address that, but that might be
Definitely
a
look at
place
it.
where we can make a difference if we
Yeah.
can, articulate to them, this is why you're here and this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Although, but in that vein, right, if a student comes from another country in 10th grade, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, how do they complete their high school education if they don't have the background of the other, let's say, 1 through, 10?
Well, yeah, we will transfer, so, they come with some kind of transcript or something.
Yeah.
And so we will whatever, they may have, like, those credits may transfer. But then, we do, if they come from another country and they don't speak English, they'll go into our, our EL classes. And so they'll be assessed and then placed, like, at an appropriate level. And so we have, they could potentially be, if they, have like they're a level 1 student in terms of their English, they could be in EL classes for pretty much almost the majority of the day. So the teachers in the EL program, like we have EL social studies and EL science, and so we have those supported classes. It's taught by a content teacher, but it's specifically for students with limited English proficiency.
But as far as like their credits to graduate, do they end up having to stay longer?
Yeah.
They're not going to graduate in 2 years, let's say, like.
Sometimes, but sometimes it depends on what they come with.
Okay.
So it depends on what like if they, if it's a student with interrupted English and they don't have any credits, then that's more difficult. But interrupted education. But if they come and they have had like a pretty solid school experience in their home country and they have a transcript, then we can typically use that.
Okay, well, thank you. I know that when we have our presentations, all the principals were really passionate and dedicated wanted to make changes here. They all expressed that in their presentations. So, and it's a reflection in where you are, and thank you for the work. Keep on moving the needle, But thank you. We're all set?
We're all set. We can adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Teaching and Learning and Diversity and Inclusion adjourned.
I'd like to call to order the Thursday, June 6th meeting of the Quincy School Committee Policy Committee. This committee was posted as a meeting of the whole. There is a quorum here. We're in attendance. First item that we're taking up is school committee policy on subcommittees themselves. We had a prior discussion about this. I believe it was the Mass Association of School Committees that gave us some advice that if we're going to set up school subcommittees, then the subcommittees need to be attended, as the superintendent said before the last subcommittee, that only those that are on the subcommittee can attend unless it's posted as a committee of the whole, as this is. It should be noted, in the last subcommittee, Mrs. Perdios was sitting in the audience because she wasn't on either of the subcommittees, but she was here in the building. So we talked it through, and I think there was a consensus that we should still keep subcommittees. And we would be diligent about making sure that every item is on the agenda before it gets referred to subcommittee on the school committee agenda, and that gets referred to subcommittee. We would have a discussion at that time. If we thought that it merited staying before the full school committee or being sent into subcommittee, and then in some occasions, we could ask, non-subcommittee members could ask the chairs if we could open it up and do a committee of the whole. So I don't know, I know that Mrs. Owens has made some changes based on the discussion that we had before. I don't know, Laura, if you'd be willing to kind of walk through some of the modifications that you made based on the discussion that we had.
So what you have is, you have two versions.
Wait, we got to get her mic on.
So for policy 2.3.3, which is subcommittees of the school committee, at the last meeting, I gave you the existing policy plus the mask policy, which didn't, it had some language that we could use, but it didn't really match how we do things. So what you have tonight is a clean version of the new policy and a redlined version, which shows you the old policy with all of the changes. So what I tried to do was incorporate some of the language from the mask policy and then sort of what we've actually been doing, which we hadn't formally documented. Okay. So, for example, you know, the second paragraph, the upon election, the vice chair will make appointments for each established subcommittee chair and members for a term of 2 years. That's a little more clear than what was, you know, was the existing what the existing language was. The items may be added to subcommittee, was not there at all, you know, how items get added to subcommittee. And then this last about the, what the subcommittees will do, some of that came from MASC, the language about reporting recommendations to the school committee, but not acting for the school committee. The subject to the provisions of the open meeting law. At the last meeting, we talked about each subcommittee should meet at least once per year. And then we also talked about reviewing the purpose, the duties, and the items in subcommittee. And so that also entailed sort of reviving, some of the members who've been on school committee for a while will remember that we used to have a one-page chart that says, if you are on teaching and learning, these are the SLT members that you work with, and these are your regular, the regular things. These are you review the school improvement plans and some of the program improvement plans. It listed all that out, so I can revive that, for the first meeting of the year. And then you'd review your items in subcommittee. So we'd start off each year with a kind of a clean slate, if that makes sense. I feel like that incorporates the things we discussed at the
So
last meeting.
I open it up for discussion if there's any comments, questions.
I'm very pleased with the changes. I think it's wonderful, appropriate, and clear.
Ms. Perdios?
So yeah, I agree. I think it's much clearer. But I didn't know, so we had a lot of conversation around people that were not a member of a subcommittee sitting at the table, or how they were allowed to participate, whether they were in the room, sitting in the back. The disclaimer that the superintendent read prior to the last subcommittee meeting about what members, so I don't see any of that on here. And I'm wondering if maybe that should be in here so that there's some clarification at least, so that the public or whoever might read these
makes sense.
would know that people that are not on the subcommittee are not allowed to participate in the subcommittee, so that it's really clear, so it doesn't look like any of us are being, unless it's a meeting of the whole.
I agree.
Just so that we're not looking neglectful or anything.
Yeah, it's like what we read, for open forum and all of that. What I think what the superintendent read prior to the subcommittee meeting, we should probably do that at every subcommittee meeting, and it would be useful to, yeah, I agree that it should add into the policy.
Okay, so
the
the
language the
statement that the-
superintendent used, are
Okay,
you fine
yep.
with that?
Yeah,
Mrs.
yeah,
Perdios?
that was fine. I think, just putting something like, other members may may sit in the audience or something, be present in the audience, but may not sit up. Well, it said that they may. It doesn't, you know.
At the table.
Like tonight, we had two, a couple of different presentations where it was all of us as a whole, and we switched to a subcommittee that, for an example, Ms. Perdios wasn't here. Did she have to get up and go?
That's what
So that's
Glenn-
fine. I just think it should be in the policy, just so that,
I
you know,
agree.
future school committees, they understand.
The reason that we did that is because there are some subcommittee meetings that you may not want to go to. I mean, you may have no interest in the athletic business.
no, I get that.
But you'll feel like you have to be here if everybody else is sitting there.
Exactly.
And we said, they shouldn't be sitting here, that's what MASC said too, they should sit over there. That's fine.
As long as it's spelled out in the policy, so people don't think that we're not interested.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, as a professional courtesy, I'm sure the chair would acknowledge anybody that's in the audience that's not on the subcommittee. You know, usually you do that, so.
Can we approve this with that one?
With that amendment,
So can I just read?
please do.
So I would say something like this, similar to what I read earlier, this subcommittee meeting is not a meeting of the whole school committee. Therefore, per open meeting law, only subcommittee members, I should put in there, may sit at the dais, is that what this is called? Mm-hmm. May discuss,
Here at the meeting?
only subcommittee, well, they can be in the meeting,
There
but
would
just
be a
not,
hearing.
Yeah, no, yeah.
we'll do something like that.
Language that,
Yeah. May only sit at the podium, or whatever this is called. May discuss, deliberate, and vote.
Yes.
So
Or may contribute to the meeting or something like that.
I think it's
May
important
contribute to
to,
discussion or,
well,
I think there's MAC language about that, isn't there? Anna?
It wasn't in their, it wasn't in their policy. All it says is it's subject to the open meeting law. Which,
Average with us.
So it's only members of the subcommittee may discuss, deliberate, and vote?
that's what I had, discuss, deliberate, and vote.
I like that. Any objections to that?
I think that's the MASC's language kind of anyway.
I do have to say, though, if we're going to go forward with this, as we kind of talked about, to try to limit the amount of presentations, like, for instance, the chronic absenteeism presentation we had tonight, that's one of the superintendent's goals, and I would have loved to have been part of that conversation. So if we're going to have a presentation like that,
Yeah.
or it's such a substantive,
We should know
important
that in
topic, we should, either try to make those meetings of the whole, subcommittee meetings of the whole, or just put them on a full meeting agenda.
And I think they do, like, in September, we'll have a full report on that, But, okay,
But
so
that's a
for
good
the,
point. I think that's also a good point. You could have reached out to the chair and said, this is an important issue to me. I want to be at the meeting.
But how do we do that if Laura's already sent, so she sends us the agenda with the items on it, but at that point, it's posted already, so you'd have the 48 hours, so you would need to know about the, like, I don't know what's happening at the meeting
That's for
until
24 hours before it gets
it's
posted.
48 hours,
No,
right?
no, but I'm saying, once she sends it to you, you're saying that it's a done deal. So-
right, usually I post on Monday for a Wednesday meeting.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying,
So the
yes.
question is, will we know on a Friday?
Right.
You know, so that we can at least notify the board members in case somebody wants to. I mean, most of these things,
There's a schedule, there's a big schedule someplace. Isn't there? Kathy's always been asking about it.
Well, that is one of the items that's in the policy subcommittee to talk about coming up with kind of a master calendar
Yeah.
of the things that we're gonna present. Great, okay.
so can I also make another suggestion? I mean, I think it should be incumbent on all of us to keep our eyes on what's in subcommittee. And if there are particular issues that we're interested in that are subcommittee, even though we don't know when that subcommittee meeting is going to be, we can reach out to the chair and say, hey, this issue is in your subcommittee. When that comes up, I'm not on your subcommittee, but I would appreciate if you would make it a committee of the whole.
yeah, and you.
But it gives us-
Or even the chair of the committee, of the subcommittee, if there's something substantial, can determine.
But it's tough to know. I mean, you won't know that I think something is,
But it's also true that you don't know what the item is until it's too
It's right.
Well,
She's right.
can I make a suggestion?
look what's in
Is on the communication, on a regular agenda, under communications, we say upcoming subcommittees. I could put there
The topics.
anticipated topics.
Oh, yeah.
For that meeting, so then that would give people a heads up, because okay.
If you know ahead of time, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I just figure some things come up after that, but
Yes.
if we can start, nothing's going to be perfect right away. If we can start and then just,
Okay.
be mindful of if there's a presentation that seems like it's more,
Okay,
Full
yeah, I can
meeting-ish.
definitely do that.
Excellent. So is there a motion on the superintendent's language to adopt? And so I have a question for you, Madam Chair, to the superintendent. So the vote out of subcommittee, even though it's a committee of the whole tonight?
The vote would just be by the subcommittee members.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so either Mrs. Cahill or Mrs. Lebo, do you want to make a motion to accept the changes to the
So, I'm not sure.
the amendment first?
The amendment is going to be to add this language.
Oh, no, do we do a motion to substitute first, and then after the motion to substitute, then the amendment? Is that the right sequence?
You approve the amendment and then you
Yeah.
approve the amendment. I mean, you approve the policy and then you approve the amendment.
That's what I just said. Yeah. So, but it's, it's essentially a substitution, right? The policy?
Yes.
That you gave us, so.
We have to do the amendment first, I'm on. Approve the amendment, and then we'll vote on the amendment. And then we'll vote on the policy. So
Can't you just make a
I'm
mo-
gonna make one amendment.
Okay.
That we approve the language that Mr. Maldi read, and the way he's gonna tweak it, to be added to this list. And that's the only amendment we're having to this.
But we haven't voted on that yet.
No, the three of us have to vote on it.
You could just do,
No, I just.
Oh, motion, and as amended?
Motion to amend it.
Motion to substitute as amended.
And I made the motion, and Ms.
The amendment.
Cahill is going to,
Second by Mrs.
and
Cahill.
the three of us get to vote.
Do we need a voice vote, or?
it has to be roll call.
Okay.
So are we else, you ready to go? Mr. Gattro,
Yes.
Mrs. Cahill,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lebo?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Is there a motion to substitute as amended?
To approve as
To
amended.
approve this
It's,
proposed revision as amended,
yeah, there is,
and move it to the main meeting.
yep.
for a
Okay,
vote.
sure.
Motion
Second.
by Mrs. Cahill, second by Mrs. Lebo.
Exactly.
Roll call.
Mr. Gattro,
Yes.
Mrs. Cahill,
Yes.
Mrs. Lebo?
Yes.
And just to clarify, can I read the language one more time?
Please do.
The subcommittee meeting is not a meeting of the whole school committee, therefore, per open meeting law, only subcommittee members may sit at the school committee podium, discuss, deliberate, and vote.
and should we say something that says unless it is set as a meeting of the whole?
No, but the vote is the different, they can't vote anyway.
It said
It
meeting.
says it in the beginning.
Okay.
I don't know if you should say vote, because even if they're sitting here, they can't vote.
No, not the vote. I just meant, should it say, because what he read said, it's not a meeting of the whole, but some of them are.
I thought he said
When-
if it's not a
Read
meeting.
it again.
No, okay, this subcommittee meeting is not a meeting of the whole school committee. Therefore, per open meeting law, only subcommittee members may sit at the school committee podium, discuss, deliberate, and vote.
Perfect.
But that's not that language is not going in here.
It will.
So yours,
That was the
Will.
motion to amend.
okay. I'm just saying, it would be an odd thing in a policy to say this subcommittee meeting is not,
Yes.
because it seems like it would need to be tweaked a little bit for it to be a policy. Maybe say something for the policy, subcommittee meetings are not typically meetings of the whole unless otherwise designated as such.
We'll put
But,
it in the
da-da-da.
right.
Right, you know what I'm
tense.
saying?
Tense.
Right, yeah.
So that when it comes before us for the final vote,
Yep.
before the full school.
Well, it'll just read, subcommittee meetings are not meetings of the whole school committee. Therefore, per open meeting law, only subcommittee members may sit at the school committee podium, discuss, deliberate, and vote. So we'll put it in the right tense.
Understood. All right, I think we're good.
So now we need a vote. We need a roll call vote on Mrs. Cahill's motion.
Okay,
My motion.
ready?
Yep.
Mr. Gattro,
Yes.
Mrs. Cahill,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lebo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Second item on the policy committee agenda is school committee policy 2.4.10, public participation in school committee meetings. Mrs. Lebo?
Thank you, Mr. Guttrow. Yes, I asked for this to come up because we made some changes during COVID that really, I think we can go back to what we were doing originally. So we always had open forum, and people came and spoke to us all the time, and during COVID, we weren't allowing that, and we took all sorts of things, but unlike the city council, who I don't think even has an open forum, we have the opportunity for community members to come in and talk to us, always, about any item that's on the agenda or about any item they're concerned about. And I'm very comfortable with that and only doing it that way. And it should be limited to the 300 words because sometimes, I'm sorry, that's the written one. So if someone wants to send in written comments, it should be limited to 300 words because some of the communications we're getting, even the form communications, have been enormous. And I also don't think that we have to read them at the school committee meeting. So I made this motion, I am suggesting this amendment that we can say they're posted online, but I don't think we have to spend 45 minutes reading 37 letters again. And I think they should be posted before the meeting so members get to read them if they want to see those letters. But so I'm changing this back to pre-COVID.
So how would it read now?
Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
The school committee shall seek the advice and counsel of citizens in planning and that's the same thing that was in the operating the schools. Meetings of the school committee shall be open to the public except when the committee goes into executive session. All citizen communication to the committee shall be addressed to the school committee as a whole. Open forum and opportunity for community input regarding the Quincy Public Schools. Community in this context is defined as a resident of Quincy, a non-resident parent of a Quincy who attends Quincy Public Schools, or a non-resident employee of the Quincy Public Schools. After giving her name and address, the speaker may make a presentation of no more than 3 minutes, and an individual may not change their time or yield to others. That's always been the policy. Residents or non-community persons may submit written statements of up to 300 words to the school committee at our email address. Written statements will also be posted on the school committee meeting minutes on the Quincy Public School website.
Discussion? Ms. Cahill?
No, I think that's fine, because if we get a barrage of emails, it's hard for us to be reading them in a meeting.
Others? Okay.
Right.
Yep. Keep going.
So I'm fine with that. My only thing, what Mrs. Lebo just kind of brought up, and I don't know if this, how we do it, but if the emails come in prior to the day of the meeting, sometimes they're coming in at the meeting day, so we really won't be able to see them. If it's going to impact,
That actually,
yeah.
that was something I actually meant to put in there. We had talked about
Yeah.
that, was that there's a cutoff.
There's a cutoff.
There's a cutoff time.
Yeah. I mean, we can post them after, but,
But I think they should go on the next meeting. I think there should be a
Yeah.
cutoff for when you can send your comments in.
yeah.
And then if they come in after that, they go on the next open forum, mail and stuff.
So what's the cutoff? What's the cutoff? Is it the
Well,
posted
it's
time of the
gonna have to
meeting?
be- It's going to have to be up to Miss Owen, because she's the one that has to be able to make the schedule.
Yeah, I would say it needs to be 4 o'clock,
Yeah,
4 PM the day of the meeting.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So,
So I would add that under next to the sentence, the sentence that says residents or non-community persons. I would add it to the end of that by 4 PM.
The written comments received by 4 PM will be considered for this particular meeting.
Yes.
Mrs. Perdios?
So I definitely agree with adding the time cutoff, that's fine. And I think adding the 300 words for the written statements, I get that, so that you're kind of in line with how long you would have if you came to the meeting. I don't really agree with the changing it from 4 to 3 minutes. I think, I don't remember, you guys have all been on here for so long, but being at that microphone, if you have a point to make, sometimes you need 4 minutes, and 4 minutes is not that long to talk, and 3 minutes is just so fast when you're trying to get some information out there. So I would not agree with the 4 to 3 minute time change, and I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. And I really, really don't agree with not reading the emails. You know, we talk about being transparent and equitable and inclusive, and making that a priority in our district, and we really, you know, from COVID, something good came out of that, where we could hear from people from home that couldn't come to meetings, that had younger kids or had to drive their kids around to activities, or people who work other jobs, evening jobs, and we now get to hear from them, and I like that. I think that that's a benefit, something good that came out of COVID. So I really think that we're limiting it, and we're really just limiting it to people who have the means and the ability to get here, and that's not what I think we should be doing. And if it's really to shorten meetings, I was thinking back over the last 4 years, and teacher contracts, COVID issues, and Lunar New Year are the only 3 topics I could think of that any open forum went longer than 10 minutes. You know, we all get paid to be here. I really don't think, for the very infrequent number of times that we have, you know, an over 10-minute open forum, I really don't, I want to hear what parents have to say, and I really don't think that we need to change the policy for that. Those issues that we do get a lot of input, we need a lot of input. We don't have all the answers. And having that discussion in a public way so that other people can read the comments or hear the comments instead of having to, no one's going to go to a website to read all the letters. It's just not going to happen. I'm appreciative that they get posted, but that's not the way to keep that public discussion going and bringing all those ideas and brainstorming together to have better decisions come out of our meetings and out of this committee. So I am very much against not reading the written statements anymore. So my 2 cents.
Thank you. Mrs. Hubley?
Sounds great. As Mrs. Lebo said, the council doesn't have open forum, and we're offering 3 minutes, and average person can say what they need to say to make their point in 3 minutes, perfectly fine. And we were fine before COVID when we did this, and it worked fine for many, 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 many years. People, yeah, so I'm fully in favor of this. I think it sounds great.
Any other comments?
I think the reading of the emails is not necessary either, because they are for us to review, to base some, have some knowledge on where people stand on different issues. And if we can read them, it's more for us to be able to make decisions when we have to vote on specific issues. So I don't think that's a problem. And also, if someone is really passionate about an issue and they want to see what other people are thinking, they can go online to read them.
Do we currently post those,
Only in certain circumstances.
the letters? So this would ensure that they're always posted?
Yes, they're always posted.
Question, Mrs. Perdios?
So you're saying that all the open forum letters written before 4 PM will be posted before the meeting so that we,
Before the meeting?
well, we would have to have time, if we're talking about a topic at a meeting and someone's giving us comments about something we may hear about that day, which is typically why people come to open forum, to talk about something that may be on an agenda. If we're going to vote on something, we wouldn't have had a chance to read it or hear about it. If they're not being read at the meeting, the only chance we would have to see that before we would vote or have that conversation is if they're on the website. I mean, I know my 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock is pretty busy with kids, so that's why I find benefit in having you read them. And I'm appreciative of every meeting that you do.
The only reason I asked is because I thought that it said with the meeting minutes, they would be posted. But if Laura's okay with them being posted before the meeting, I have no objections.
I was just thinking, that it's a section of the website. Basically, I create a page
Yeah.
for every meeting with the agenda, the minutes,
Yep.
and then I would just put the letters there as well.
Mrs. Lebo?
So would it be wise to make it 4 PM the day before? Because most people know, making plans to come to open forum or to write a letter, most people know. So maybe if we made it 4 PM the day before the meeting, that would be even more, I mean, they'll know that. We're going to read that at the
Give me
beginning.
the opportunity to basically notify you
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
letters.
Yeah,
if
and
there
even
are
just what the
letters.
topics of the letters were. So I'm fine with doing that, because most people know the day before whether they're going to come to open forum. I mean, I know whenever I came, I knew a long time before I was going to come. So I would be happy if we made it the day before.
And would we say at the meeting at Open Forum, we received 4 letters on these topics? They're on the website. Okay. Do we need to explicitly say that in the policy book or no?
I mean, and people's names would also be, I mean, it's not in the policy book right now, but everybody who gets up and speaks their name is entered into the meeting minutes.
Meeting
It's
minutes,
records, and I would do the same for the written as I do
Yes.
now.
So if you just put that one statement in on the third paragraph, I am perfectly happy. Did I make a motion to do this yet?
Not yet, yeah, no, I was just gonna say so I support the posting. I don't have any objections to that, but I also don't have any objection to Mrs. Perdios' suggestion that we stay at 4 minutes, but I can't, as the chair, I can't make that motion to keep it as 4 minutes. I mean, if we're reducing the amount of time by not reading letters, I don't have an objection to having the people that actually come up to the microphone speak for 4 minutes, so, but somebody else would have to make that motion.
I think the 300 words and the 3 minutes align pretty well,
Yeah,
so I'm perfectly happy with it the way it stands.
My one comment about the emails is that typically when we have an open forum and we have the emails, talking about an issue, concerns, when we're having deliberations and we're talking about something specific. So we have time to read them all before we have another meeting where we vote on something. So that, alleviates some of the not knowing what other people might have to say about a certain issue prior to a vote. So I think that's something to think about.
So is there a motion to amend here? Are we making a motion to amend that basically says written statements must be submitted by X time?
By 4 PM of the day prior to the meeting, to the school committee meeting.
And will be posted but it says will be posted with school committee meeting minutes to the website. We're not saying that anymore. We're
So we
saying-
should say on the school committee meeting minutes section of the website.
Prior to the meeting taking place? Does it need to say on the day of the meeting? Like, if you submit it 24 hours before the meeting, it will be on the website the day of the meeting.
Yep.
That's what we want the language
Yes.
to say.
Well, it wouldn't, because it would have to be 4 PM the day before, so it would be like 26 hours, right?
So if it gets to her 24, at 4 PM the day before, then by 4 PM the next day, it will be posted on the website,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So it,
Someone could send an email 2 days prior or 3 days
Right.
prior for that meeting.
yeah, yeah.
As long
Yeah,
as
they
they're
do.
there prior to 4 o'clock the day of the meeting.
So this is how I think that paragraph would read. Residents or non-community persons may submit written statements of up to 300 words to the school committee at qscopenforum@quincypublicschools.com by 4 PM of the day prior to the school committee meeting. Written statements will be posted on the school committee meeting minutes section of the Quincy Public Schools website prior to the meeting start time. So,
Any discussion or objection?
None.
Anybody want to make, yeah, to amend?
Approve the amendment?
Yep.
Motion to approve the amendment?
Second,
Mrs. Lebo? Roll call?
Mr. Guttrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebo?
yes.
Is there a motion to,
Oh, and then a
Move it to
motion
the main
to
committee.
move it to the main meeting for a vote.
To approve it.
as amended?
Approve the.
Motion to approve as
the
amended.
policy change.
Yeah.
We did the amendment, now we're going to.
Motion
Second,
to approve.
second,
Mr. Guttrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebo?
yes.
May I ask what happens now with that?
So it'll go to the full
Move to the main
school
meeting.
committee,
Sit.
and,
Sit.
it'll sit, and then it'll have an opportunity to come out where we could make amendments again. Yep. So, no other matter before the policy committee. This meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Ginther.